Expos or exponentials refer to the ability to soften that curve, that actual step curve on the channel that you're affecting. So we're able to apply positive or negative expos to any given channel, and that changes the way the model actually responds. In fact, you can set it up to where there's very little. We'll pull up our servo gauge overlay here. There's very little movement at the center. For people that are new to flying, they want very little movement at the center because they're kind of shaky on their thumbs and things happen real quick. So we want to soften down or minimize that movement at the center of the gimbal, but then you don't want to kill all of your ability to control the control surface. You want to be able to get full deflection or near full deflection. So when we get out further away from center, we kind of regain that control of being able to stretch out there a little bit and get full deflection to maybe get ourselves out of trouble. So when we look at expos, this picks up from the previous clinic, which is dual rates. You're going to want to watch that first because I'm just going to roll through this to keep things fairly short and brief. The left and right rates right now in our down switch position are set to 50%. We're going to go ahead and clear that out because we want to see what expos do all on their own. So now in both of our switch positions, we're back to 100% travel both left and right. And then we're going to go ahead and take a look at expos. So let's go into the expos. And with expos now highlighted, you can dial in negative or positive expos, and we can see that immediately change on the graph. We've got our switch in a down position, so we're going to go in our up position. We want it to be 0 expo, so full control. Down position now, we're going to go ahead and dial some expo in. The most common expo that people apply at first is, again, to soften that center control point. So we're going to dial in some negative expo. If you refer to, we'll put in fairly high amount. We'll put in like negative 80% so we can really see it exaggerated on the servo gauge. So now, if you notice, if you look at the text, supporting text on the web page, you can see that dotted line, that all of the resolution of the radio is now nearly vertical at the extents, but then fairly horizontal at the center. What this allows us to do then is have fairly simple or consistent movement at the center, stretching out each of those dots, and then compressing each of those dots towards the end means every single bit of linear movement covers a lot more ground at the extents. So if we look at our servo gauge, we can see that immediately. Right at the center, I'm moving it quite a bit here, and I'm not getting much. I'm getting about 5 degrees of movement with about 25% of stick movement. Now the nice thing is if I start at the center and I start moving myself over consistently, you can see at the extent then, a tiny bit of movement covers about almost 10 degrees of movement. 10 degrees on the actual servo movement, and about 20% of my movement on my stick. So now I can kind of shake and bounce around in the center point, and my servo really isn't moving that much. It's twitching, but it's not going crazy. Out at the extents though, it really goes nuts. And on a consistent movement, if we go left and right, fairly consistently, you can see that it definitely accelerates out at the extents. That's the most common expo you'll dial in, is negative expo. The other way to go, of course, is positive expo. And I use positive expo on my tail rotors a lot of times when I'm doing scale flight. I want it real sensitive so I don't have to put a whole lot of movement or input in. So if we take it 80 to the positive, there we go. Now I've got a real sensitive stick in the center. Very little tiny bit of movement is really moving. We've got our 10 degrees on less than 20% of movement, or 20% of movement on the stick now towards the center, which if you're a beginner, you don't want this in your control surface. You're playing get out of control real quick. And then as we get towards the end, you can see a lot of movement. It really doesn't move the servo a whole lot. So that's expos. They're pretty straightforward and very easy to, well, actually they're very easy to feel. The neatest thing about expos is the difference is immediate. So if you've got dual rates in and it just isn't quite giving you that smooth movement you're looking for, when you go into low rates, things still feel a little bit jumpy, but you don't want to kill your total extent of travel. Now's when you dial in a little bit of expo to maybe soften some of that center position to give you some more fine control, but then still have the ability to go all the way to the extent and get yourself out of trouble.